Good afternoon. I'd like to start off by offering my thoughts and prayers to everyone affected by the alarming situation in central Nova Scotia. I am, of course, reassured by reports that the RCMP have apprehended a suspect, and we are hoping for everyone to come through this as best as possible. Comme vous savez, la pandémie COVID-19 met notre pays dans une situation d'urgence.
The pandemic has put our country in an unprecedented situation.
Plus de 33 000 Canadiens
More
et
than
Canadiennes
33,000
sont malades,
Canadians
et nombre d'entre eux
are
ont dû
sick,
être
and many of
hospitalisés.
them have been
Un trop grand
hospitalized.
nombre d'entre nous pleurent la perte
Too many
de
of
membres
us
de notre famille.
are
et
mourning
d'amis.
the loss of a family member or a friend.
Last week, the government was calling for a Team Canada approach. Team Canada needs to be able to ask questions more than just once a week. Healthcare professionals are working around the clock without always having the necessary medical supplies. Questions relating to why so many masks and gowns were disposed of a few months ago without, it seems, any plans for replenishing the national stockpile. Our economy is almost completely shut down, putting millions out of work and endangering businesses from coast to coast. Are the new emergency benefits supporting everyone who needs help? Our seniors are isolated and in tragic cases in need of much better care. Are the necessary steps being taken to support vulnerable Canadians? Now, the Prime Minister says it will be weeks before Canada can begin to open up again. What plans are being made for that opening? The best place for our elected representatives to get answers to these questions is in the House of Commons in Ottawa. Comme vous le savez, la Chambre des communes devrait reprendre
As you
ses
know,
travaux
the
demain
House of Commons
après
is scheduled to
l'élargissement
resume tomorrow
de 5
following
semaines.
a 5-week
Les
adjournment.
négociations entre les partis se poursuivent
Negotiations among the
et
parties
j'espère que le
continue,
gouvernement acceptera notre
and I hope that the
proposition
government will accept
raisonnable.
our reasonable
Le
proposal.
Parlement doit rester ouvert afin
Parliament
que nous
must remain
puissions
open
améliorer les
so that we can
programmes
improve
et politiques du gouvernement
government
et
programs
obtenir
and
de
policies
meilleurs résultats
and
pour les
obtain
Canadiens.
the best results for
Now,
Canadians.
as you know, all parties have agreed several times that Parliament will reopen tomorrow. The question now is how best to do that. Negotiations are still ongoing. I remain hopeful that the government will agree to our common sense proposal to continue to hold in-person sittings. We believe these sittings should happen 3 times each week. Parliament must remain open so that we can improve government programs and policies and get better results for Canadians. I strongly believe that Parliament is an essential service. Des représentants gouvernementaux au Japon, en Italie, en France, en
Governments in
Allemagne,
Japan,
en
Italy,
Grèce,
France,
en
Germany,
Suède, en Finlande
Greece,
et au Parlement
Sweden,
européen
Finland, and the
continuent
European
à se
Union
réunir
continue
en
to
cette
sit
période difficile.
during this difficult
Notre
time.
démocratie devrait
Our
fonctionner
democracy
de la même manière.
should operate the same way.
Now, the Prime Minister keeps suggesting that without a deal, all 338 MPs will have to return to Ottawa on Monday with their staff. That isn't true, and he knows it. And I've got to tell you something. It's extremely troubling watching the Prime Minister saying things that he knows aren't true. At a time when Canadians are looking to him for stability and leadership, it undermines his credibility when he says things that he knows won't happen. Only 20 MPs are required for quorum, and pretending otherwise to try to force the opposition to accept a bad deal is wrong. One sitting each week is unacceptable, even if it is eventually supplemented by a virtual sitting for a handful of additional MPs. Physical distancing means staying 2 meters apart, not staying away from Parliament. Now, Mr. Trudeau keeps pretending that his primary concern is on the health and safety of parliamentarians and staff. If that was the case, the government should have been negotiating over the last 2 weeks to determine what the optimal number of MPs in the chamber is and what public health requirements are needed to keep Parliament open. Instead, he keeps arguing that he should only have to show up to answer Canadians' questions 1 day a week. The Prime Minister stands and answers media questions 7 days a week. His ministers gather to hold a press briefing every day. Mr. Trudeau needs to explain why he is trying to replace Parliament with press conferences. Au cours des 2 dernières séances d'urgence, 32 députés
during the last 2 emergency
représentant
sittings,
tous les partis.
32 members were
Cela nous a
present
permis de
representing all
suivre les
parties.
conseils de
That
santé
enabled
publique
us to
et de
follow the
continuer
public health
à exercer
advice
nos fonctions.
and to continue
Les
to
deux
carry
fois,
out our duties.
des conservateurs
Both
représentent des
times,
circonscriptions de
Conservatives
partout au pays
representing ridings from
ont
across the
participé.
country
Nous
participated.
proposons que le modèle continue d'être utilisé.
We are proposing that the same model
After all,
continue to be
during
used.
the last 2 emergency sittings, 32 MPs attended representing all parties. This allowed us to follow public health advice and still carry out our duties. Both times, Conservatives representing ridings from all over the country participated in the debate, and we got better results for Canadians because of it. We are proposing that model be used 3 times each week. In order to ensure that Canadians get the real help they need, there must be oversight and accountability. The Prime Minister says he wants a reasonable compromise. We believe we have a reasonable proposal on the table. All parties must come together to ensure that Parliament continues to function during the difficult days ahead. Canadians' lives and livelihoods literally depend on the government getting the response to the pandemic right. Scrutiny and accountability will lead to better outcomes, as we have already seen in the past. Conservatives are focused on helping Canadians through this crisis and ensuring that when the time comes, we have a plan to get Canada's economy back on track. J'espère sincèrement que tous les partis vont accepter
It is my sincere hope that all parties will agree to our common sense proposals. Canadians are counting on us.
It's my sincere hope that all parties will agree to our common sense proposals. Canadians are counting on us. Thank you very much. Happy to take your questions. Merci beaucoup.
We'll now start the question period. As usual, 1 question, 1 follow-up. Comme d'habitude pour la période de questions, une question et une question de suivi. We'll start with the question on the phone and then we'll turn to the room. Opérateur au téléphone, do we have any question on the line?
Thank you. Merci. Star 1 to ask a question. Étoile 1 pour une question. La première question, Christian Noël, Radio-Canada. À vous.
The first question is from
Bonjour,
Christian
Monsieur Scheer,
Noël.
vous allez bien?
Très bien, merci. Et vous?
Good morning, Good afternoon, Mr. Scheer. Are you doing well?
J'aimerais
Yes,
savoir
thank you.
pourquoi est-ce que vous croyez
I'd like to know why
que le Premier ministre
You
Trudeau
think Prime Minister
essaie
Trudeau
d'éviter de
is
réduire le
trying
nombre de
to
séances en
avoid
personne et pourquoi vous croyez il insiste sur
sitting
le
3 times a
virtuel?
week, and why is he focusing so
C'est clair
intently
que
on virtual
le
sittings?
gouvernement a pris des mauvaises décisions.
It's clear that the government
C'est
made
clair
poor
que doit
decisions.
changer le
Clearly,
programme jour par jour.
the government needs
C'est
to
clair que ce
adjust
gouvernement
every day.
n'accepte pas les propositions pour la transparence et
And the
responsabilisation.
government
C'est
is
pas la
not
première fois
accepting our
que le
proposals for
gouvernement a
transparency.
lutté contre
This isn't the
les
first time
mesures
the
de
government has fought
transparence et
against
responsabilisation.
transparent measures
C'est clair
like
que dans la
this.
Chambre des communes,
It's clear
le
that
Premier ministre
in the
doit
House,
répondre
the Prime
des
Minister
questions
must
difficiles pour
answer
lui, mais nécessaires pour
questions,
les Canadiens.
difficult questions, but questions that are necessary for
Mais en même temps,
Canadians.
pour ça, ces questions-là peuvent
Question.
être posées et répondues de façon
Well,
virtuelle.
those questions
Et
could
votre
be
caucus
put and
conservateur
answered
qui est dans l'Ouest
virtually.
et qui ne peuvent pas tous venir à Ottawa
Not all
pourraient
members of your
bénéficier
caucus
davantage de
can
séances virtuelles pour
come
avoir
to
une meilleure
Ottawa, but through
représentation
virtual
régionale de ces
sittings,
questions.
you could have
Alors,
a better
pourquoi vous vous opposez
regional
à
representation.
davantage
So
de
why are
séances
you
virtuelles?
opposed to more virtual sittings?
La question de les séances
Answer.
virtuelles
The issue
reste
surrounding
avec
virtual
le comité
sittings
permanent des affaires de la
is
Chambre. Il n'y a
the
aucun rapport,
decision
il y a
of the Standing
aucun
Committee
plan
on
pour
Procedure and
avoir
House
les
Affairs.
sessions virtuelles et
There
on ne
is
peut pas hésiter lorsque la technologie sera
no plan
disponible
at
dans 3,
present.
4, 5 semaines.
The technology is an issue.
Les Canadiens dans le temps réel.
But this crisis is affecting
On a déjà
Canadians in
vu
real
le
time, as we've
bénéfice,
already seen.
pour les programmes gouvernementaux d'avoir la
There's a benefit
participation
for
des
the government
partis
to have
d'opposition. On
participation
vu avec,
by the
des
opposition
conférences
parties.
virtuelles,
And
déjà le problème avec les
we've
députés dans les
seen
régions rurales,
problems
avec,
with
la
virtual
connectivité.
meetings
C'est
for
un
members
défi.
in rural areas.
Proposition
It's a
que
challenge.
j'ai vu la dernière fois que j'ai obtenu l'information pour
The
les plans
last
pour
time
les
I
séances
received
virtuelles.
information
Il n'y a aucune
on
capacité
virtual
d'avoir
settings,
un grand nombre de
I
députés
was
participer.
informed
Alors,
that
c'est
it's
dans la
impossible to
Chambre
have a lot of
qu'on
members
peut le faire, on peut poser les questions
at the same
et
time.
rendre
So in
le
the chamber,
gouvernement
in the House, we can
responsable.
ask questions
Et on a
responsibly.
déjà fait 2 fois
We've already done
avec un
so
nombre de
twice
députés
with a
réduit,
reduced
représentant
number of members
tous
of
les partis.
Parliament
Alors, c'est
representing
possible.
all parties. So it is possible. There's no valid reason, therefore, to not repeat the experience. There's a reduced number of staff on the Hill. The cafeteria staff isn't on site. The pages are not working either, so we can work with a reduced number of staff on the Hill. Next question on the line.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Lina Dib, La Presse canadienne. À vous.
Oui.
Next question is from Lina Dib.
Quand vous dites que les 338 députés ne sont pas obligés
that
de
338 members aren't required to show up tomorrow morning if there's no agreement.
Qu'est-ce qu'il en est, par exemple, des employés de l'administration de la Chambre,
with administrative
des gardes
staff,
de sécurité,
security
de tous ces gens-là,
guards,
s'il n'y a aucune
all of those
entente
people,
entre tous les partis reconnus en
if there's no
Chambre, ces
agreement
gens-là, ils
among
sont obligés de se
the
présenter
parties,
au
they
travail
will
demain
have
ou pas?
to show up for work tomorrow or not.
Au gouvernement et aux autres partis
Answer, we've already told the government that we will be complying with the public health requirements. We've said that we don't need to have that many members in attendance, nor do we need all of the services that are available on the Hill. That's our position. So we hope that we will be able to reach an agreement today to resolve the matter for tomorrow and future days. On our side, we do not require all of those services on the Hill.
OK, donc je comprends que vous n'aurez pas besoin que
So
des employés de l'administration de la Chambre soient là, que les traducteurs soient là, que les gardes de
House
sécurité soient
administrators
là.
are there, but you would need the translators, you would need security.
L'objet d'une entente entre tous les partis demain matin, quoi qu'il arrive.
But regardless of what
les
happens,
traducteurs n'auront pas besoin de se présenter, ni l'administration.
Well, then are you saying that those employees won't need to show up?
Ma question, c'est quel exemple vous pensez que vous donnez?
What example are you setting then as politicians?
Qui n'arrivez pas à vous entendre dans
you
un
can't
moment
reach an agreement at a time
où le pays est totalement en crise et où ce que tous les gens se plient dans tous les sens pour accommoder le bien commun.
People are focusing on the common good. Tomorrow is the date that was agreed to. There were 3 motions adopted by the House of Commons. And tomorrow is the date the House reconvenes. Our first offer was 4 sittings. Now we've reduced that to 3. And we want to have a situation where we have more than the one day the government is proposing to be responsible for answering questions. The government is changing its measures on a daily basis. The details are being modified and reacting to the crisis. So this is happening on a daily basis. It's necessary for Parliament to be sitting.
Prochaine question au téléphone.
Next question on the phone.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Lee Berthium, the Canadian Press. Line open.
Yes, Mr. Scheer, thank you. I was hoping you could just explain in English why virtual sessions, you're opposed to virtual sessions and want in-person sessions.
Well, first of all, the question of virtual sittings has been referred to the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs to offer guidelines and advice on how to implement them. There are many, many questions that remain in terms of the capacity of the House of Commons to offer this type of sitting. Questions everything from how parliamentary privilege and freedom of speech in a parliamentary context will be protected in a virtual sitting. There are connectivity issues with MPs who are in rural and remote locations who may not be able to participate fully. So there are a whole host of questions that Procedure and House Affairs are seized with. And Conservatives certainly look forward to that report and would support the implementation of virtual sittings to supplement in-person sittings. Our point is that we cannot wait for the weeks and weeks that it may take the House of Commons administration to be able to provide that type of service to Canadians. The government is changing its positions day after day. They are amending their programs. They are changing the way the programs are delivered and who is eligible for them on a daily basis. Advice to Canadians also changes regularly with this government. So it's clear that we need regular accountability sessions in the House of Commons to allow for members of Parliament to pose the difficult questions, the tough questions, that this government has to answer for, and in order to get better results from Canadians. We've already seen when parliamentarians are sitting, when opposition parties hold this government to account, go through their legislation with a fine-tooth comb, we are able to get a better program for Canadians. That's precisely why we're proposing to do this. Millions of Canadians are still working. There are millions of Canadians who are providing services to their fellow citizens in this time of crisis. We believe that Parliament is an essential service and that we will get Canadians through this crisis in a better way if Parliament is allowed to do its job.
And you said that if an agreement isn't reached, that doesn't mean 338 MPs will be returning to the House of Commons tomorrow. My question is, how many Conservative MPs are you planning or would you bring tomorrow if an agreement isn't reached? And what do you say to those staff members, translators, security, etc., who will be required to be there?
Well, and thank you for raising that, because I do want to underscore there are those who are saying, and I know the Prime Minister alluded to this today, saying that if there's no deal, all 338 MPs will be here tomorrow. That is completely false, and it's disingenuous to try to put that forward before Canadians as if that was a real scenario, just to try to put pressure on opposition parties to accept the government's position. We have shown that we can operate with a small number of MPs with reduced services. We're saying we don't need the pages, we don't need cafeteria services. We can get by with much reduced support staff. I will point out that every time the Prime Minister gives these briefings, when ministers give briefings, there are similar types of support staff provided to them when it comes to translation services and things like that. So we believe that we can operate in this way. We are saying that we will respect the agreements that were had in the previous two sittings. We will have a similar number of members of Parliament that we've already had to show that we can both respect health guidelines and continue to ensure that our parliamentary and democratic institutions function in this crisis.
We'll now take questions in the room.
Hi, Mr. Scheer. Ashley Burke, CBC News. More in-person sittings means that MPs would be taking more risks. What do you say to that? What if an MP ended up getting COVID-19 because of this increased travel? Would your position on more in-person sittings change?
I think we have to look at the benefits that Parliament has already been able to provide Canadians. We've twice now got legislation that the government proposed, and Conservatives and opposition parties, to give the other parties credit, have gotten better results for Canadians because of our participation, because of our role in this. During times of crisis, we need our government held accountable. It is an essential service. We have to be able to ask the tough questions, to get at the bottom of what basis decisions are made and how people are falling through the cracks. The best way to do that is in the House of Commons. We can go into the chamber, the same types of rules that allow people to go get groceries safely and minimize risk, the same type of guidelines that allow people to go into their essential service jobs every day, I believe we can follow and implement here. And that really should have been the focus of the conversation between parties over the last 3 weeks, was how best to operate in the chamber, how best to minimize risk to members of Parliament and staff on the Hill. Instead, the government has chosen to focus on their proposal, which is to virtually eliminate the role of Parliament in this crisis, to eliminate 80% of the sitting days. We don't believe that that's the best way to get results for Canadians or to get better outcomes for Canadians.
The Liberals say that what your party's proposing, the 3 in-person sittings, they claim would amount to 6 question periods, which is more than usual. What do you say to that?
I don't know how in a week when you have 5 question periods and we're offering to have 3 sessions a week. I don't know where that math comes from. 3 is less than 5.
Next question in the room.
Mr. Scheer, Ian Woods, CTV News. What exactly, or specifics, are you hoping to get from the government in an in-person sitting that you couldn't get from them in a virtual sitting?
Well, we've already seen when you have a minister or even the Prime Minister unable to answer questions, we're able to highlight weaknesses and failures in their response to this. I asked a question to the Deputy Prime Minister on March 11th, March 12th, asking what the plan was for the government to procure ventilators. A month later, when we had the special sitting last week, the Prime Minister said that we were still going to be weeks away. So it's with that kind of continued pressure in the House of Commons, continued highlighting of gaps in their programs, that we're able to get results. I believe that it's essential that continues to happen. I'll also point out that right now, the way we've been operating, there's no mechanism for the government to have their legislation introduced normally and have it analyzed and scrutinized. We've been called back to Parliament to deal with legislation on an accelerated timeline where we don't have the normal committee study or normal debate that ultimately leads to better products. We've proposed a work plan that will allow them to introduce government legislation in a way that will give parliamentarians more time to analyze it and make sure that it's doing exactly what it needs to do. That's what we saw last Saturday, where we had to make amendments right up until the very last moment before that bill was introduced. All of those conversations took place offline because the House wasn't sitting. And in order to get the objections, concerns, the feedback from Canadians, we believe that the parliamentary session was designed to do exactly that, and we should be using it during this crisis.
And the government and the Bloc and the NDP, they've come to an agreement on one in-person sitting and eventually 2 virtual sittings a week. You've not joined in with that agreement. Why are you willing to risk the health and safety of members of Parliament coming back? I mean, you talked about we can take the same precautions that we do going to grocery stores or essential businesses we need to visit, but that's not negating a risk. It's still minimizing it. There's still a risk. So why do you have a different view than the other parties on that?
Well, we believe that Parliament plays an essential role all the time, and doubly so during a crisis. And I really think the onus has to be on the Prime Minister to explain why what we've already shown can happen can't be used in the future. We've already shown that each caucus can have a representation that takes into account regional differences, using MPs who are going to be in Ottawa for a length of time or who are able to get here quickly without major travel. We've already shown that can happen. We've already shown that we can get better results for it. It's essential that we do this. We know that we will get through this crisis better in a stronger position if government programs and policies are put to the test, and Canadians will be better off for that. And so that's going to continue to be our position. We think in times like this, we need more accountability, more transparency, not less.
Back to the phone, opérateur au téléphone. Next question.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Joël Denis Bellavance, La Presse. À vous.
The next question is from Joël Denis Bellavance, La Presse. Mr. Scheer, why do you think the Parliament is an essential service? Like other essential services are. Why, in your opinion, is Parliament an essential service?
C'est le gouvernement fédéral qui
the federal government is responsible
la santé
for the Public Health Agency.
C'est cette agence qui donne
that
le conseil
agency
et direction.
is providing guidance
base leurs décisions sur l'évidence, le meilleur dans le monde. C'est le gouvernement qui va répondre à la crise
are based on advice from the agency. The government is making decisions to help Canadians who've lost their jobs, who can't pay their bills, their mortgages. And the government is there for the small and medium-sized businesses that have been devastated. So it's clear that the federal government is responsible for helping Canadians, and it's Parliament, through the House of Commons, that makes sure the government makes the right decisions. Question. So if I understand correctly, then, the entire Conservative caucus will not be present tomorrow. What happens if there's no agreement? The House will sit tomorrow with a reduced number of representatives from your party, the Bloc, the NDP, and the Green Party. But regardless of the decision, Parliament sits tomorrow. Answer. The original agreement was that Parliament would resume tomorrow. That's the motion that was adopted on 3 occasions by all parties in the House. Now we're talking about the weeks to come until the end of the crisis. We said that we will be respecting public health guidelines. We aren't putting any MPs in danger. We'll be respecting advice from health officials, and we'll be sending in the same number of members of Parliament as we have in the past. Now, I hope that we can, by tomorrow morning, come up with an agreement that will respect the need for the Parliament to play a role during the crisis. Next
Thank
question
you.
on the phone.
Merci. Next question, Christopher Gooley, the Tyee. Line open.
Good afternoon, Mr. Scheer.
Hi there.
Could regular calls involving the opposition leaders and the Prime Minister, as he holds weekly with the premiers, improve the dialogue with the government beyond the sittings of Parliament?
Well, I think anytime that you are engaging with opposition parties when you're the Prime Minister, it'll lead to better outcomes. So far, there have been some lines of communication, but we haven't been able to get the daily access to ministers and Prime Ministers that we would normally get in a House of Commons context. A few weeks ago, the Prime Minister and his ministers talked about a Team Canada approach. Well, when we started to show up, roll up our sleeves, help them improve their legislation and get better products for Canadians, all of a sudden they started to back away from that idea. And again, we see them trying to relegate the role of Parliament off to the sidelines. And as a result, Canadians will not have as good a product as they could from this government if that is allowed to be the case.
And one last...
I have a follow-up if I could.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Several changes the government has made to COVID relief measures, such as the Canada Emergency Response Benefit for workers, the Wage Subsidy Initiative for businesses, and the recent revisions regarding emergency loans and commercial rent assistance for small businesses were proposed by the opposition parties. So do you think that if the leaders talked regularly, valuable time could be saved and programs and money could get out the door sooner?
Yes, I believe that if the government would like to have a more dynamic involvement with our party, we would certainly be willing to do that. We've highlighted some of these concerns weeks ago. And when they first proposed some of these benefits and programs, we quickly heard from our constituents and we raised those concerns. And for weeks, they were not addressed. So again, having regular sessions of the House of Commons multiple times a week will allow that work to be done much more quickly. We can put pressure on the government. We can highlight those concerns instead of trying to, book a phone call and hope you get one back in a couple of days. We can do this in the chamber, in the House of Commons. We can make the case and get the government to respond much more quickly than it has. We're talking about a government that is responding to a crisis. We've got evidence of poor decisions, of getting the call wrong early on. For example, saying that there was no need to close borders or impose travel restrictions. That was the wrong decision. The fact that the stockpile of personal protective equipment was dumped, was thrown out just months before this crisis started without a plan to replenish it. We've seen poor decisions being made. We need to hold the government responsible for those decisions so that we don't repeat them. And so that the evidence that is used to make better decisions is the right information and the accurate information. And that when they come out with a program or policy, that we can get it improved upon or fix the gaps much more quickly. This government is making changes on a near daily basis to the programs that they've already announced. They call back Parliament to enact emergency legislation to make their amendments. What we're saying is let's have regular sittings of the House of Commons so that we don't need to be doing this on an ad hoc basis, but we can have an accountability plan for the next few weeks to get through this crisis. We believe Canadians will be better served for that, and that's why we are pushing so hard for these types of sessions.
We'll take one last question on the phone. Operator.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Andrew Lawton, True North. Line open.
Good afternoon, Mr. Scheer. It seems like all parties right now are making this up as they go. We've known that a pandemic was possible for going back to January now. I mean, you as a former House Speaker, I'm sure, must have had some contingency plans within the House of Commons for emergency situations. Why has there not been more preparation for deciding how Parliament will function in this before this point?
Well, that is a good question. That is something that, as parliamentarians, we will likely want to study to have a more comprehensive plan in place. Unfortunately, sometimes it does take something like this to ensure that action is moved in terms of planning for certain types of catastrophes. So I'm sure that when this is over, parliamentarians will look kind of internally and say, okay, what can we do as an institution to have a more regular plan in place that all parties can agree to on the front end and not have to do this midstream. But none of that should prevent us. Those types of conversations should not prevent us from agreeing on the need for oversight now, on transparency now. We need to make sure that when the government is telling us something, it's accurate. We need to make sure that when they're coming out with a program, it's as comprehensive as possible, and it doesn't take weeks to fix gaps and weaknesses. So we're going to continue to push for this, and we're hopeful that the other parties agree.
Regarding the Prime Minister's claim that as it stands now, 338 MPs need to be back in Ottawa tomorrow, is he lying?
Well, he's saying something that's not true. It's just false, and we've already indicated for the past 3 weeks since this crisis first hit that we would be respecting public health guidelines, and that is our position. We made that known to the other parties as well. So I don't know why he continues to say that. It's certainly not the case. And so when Canadians are judging, each political party on its approach to these negotiations and how best to have Parliament operate, they need to keep in mind that what the Prime Minister is saying is just not true.
This concludes the press conference today. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The conference is now ended. Please disconnect your lines at this time, and we thank you for your participation.